Okay, we're off. Thank you guys for coming today to our webinar on writing the sports essay for the personal statement. This is a really big topic, obviously, and we're excited to present on it today. The entire time during our presentation, we are going to have the Q&A open. So if at any point you have a question and you would like to submit it to us, you can go ahead and click on Q&A, type it in, hit submit, and I will do my best, and Nina will do her best to answer those questions as they come in or as appropriate. Okay, so without further ado, we will move ahead. My name is Justin. I've been with ESM for about 7 years now. Started in Los Angeles, then went to Europe. Now I'm in San Francisco. It's been a long road. I've been doing tutoring and college counseling for pretty much the entire time. So I've seen a great many essays written about a great many topics, and many of those are about sports. So I like to think that I have some useful knowledge to impart, and that I've seen enough to impart that knowledge well. And I'm very happy to be joined by Nina today.
Thank you, Justin. Hi, everyone. My name is Nina. I am a college coach here at ESM. Definitely don't have as much experience here as Justin does, since this is my seventh month at ESM, but I do have past experience helping students with their college applications, their essays. So I'm really happy to be here today and to help you guys get a better idea of what to look for, what not to look for, and get started from here, hopefully.
Great. Okay.
Okay, so the personal statement. So these are some general points. The personal statement is going to be the centerpiece of your application. For many students, sports represents one of the best opportunities to demonstrate leadership, commitment, and integrity, along with, I'm sure, many other characteristics. And the ESM way means that the paper should be thesis-driven, not activity-driven. So basically, we need to keep asking ourselves, what does this say about me? We don't want the essays to say this is a thing I did or a thing that I do. We want it to say this is who I am. We also wanted to say this is what I learned and this is how I show up. So it's important to remember how the essay serves the rest of your application. So is it offering important balance? Is it filling the humanity void? Does it speak to your you-ness, and or does it simply elaborate upon an activity we've mentioned elsewhere? Justin?
I might add that this is particularly so given the environment with testing right now. Many schools, including the UCs, which don't have personal statements per se, but you might still be writing about sports for one of those essays. Many schools have gone test blind, not even test optional. They can't even look at test scores. Yep. So these schools are going to be getting maybe multiple applicants from your high school, and maybe you're going to profile pretty similarly in terms of your grades. So this essay, you could perhaps argue, is even more important now because you have fewer chances to stand out. For these schools, you can no longer get that 33, 34, 35 on the ACT and let that help you stand out. Now you're going to have to do it some other way. So I would argue even more important than before.
Definitely.
So before we even get into writing about sports and looking at some sports essays, we want to ask, are you sure you want to write about sports? There are a few reasons why you might not want to. The first is that it's a common topic. And compared to some other topics, it might be more difficult to stand out. And again, we're looking to stand out here. So a lot of our counselors, I can remember my colleague Lucas saying to me at one point recently, when I solicited some examples of sports essays from him, he said, usually I don't even let my students write about sports. And I think that that's really worth considering because it is simply something that many students do for high school. And when these admissions departments are reading thousands of applications, there might be something more unique you have. That's not to say for sure that you shouldn't write about sports. And a little secret to share with you, I wrote about sports. We're going to talk about my essay a little bit as we move forward. I can't find it, thankfully. It was probably too bad to share. So you might arrive at the possibility, okay, I am writing about sports. This is how I demonstrate how I show up. This is how I demonstrate what I've learned. This is how I demonstrate who I am. But you should think about those questions really hard and make sure that that's actually the case. If you do write about sports, you come to the conclusion that that is what you want to do, that that is the best way to illustrate your unique qualities and characteristics. You need to make sure that you make a pivot. What I mean by that is that if you write about sports the whole essay or some challenge you overcame in sports, but you don't give us some application of what you learned in real life beyond the athletic field, we might feel limited about what we learned. Limited in terms of, okay, we learned that Joey worked really hard to make the starting soccer team, and it taught him about hard work and perseverance. But where else has Joey applied that? And if we don't get that application in academics or application in an internship or application in some kind of personal relationship with adults or difficult family relationships, if we don't get some illustration, some pivot to another topic, we can walk away feeling underwhelmed by a sports essay. So we really need to make sure that we try to pivot and we hone and polish that pivot such that it doesn't feel forced. We're going to see, again, some specifics of this later. For some people, writing about sports might actually be what we would call going against type. You might have a uber nerd who gets hundreds on everything and they're the captain of the chess club, but then they write this essay about skateboarding or I don't know, windsurfing. And it totally blows your mind that, oh man, this person who I typecast as one type of thing actually has this whole other side to them. And that can be really valuable. But on the flip side, you need to think about if your whole resume is sports, you were the captain of this team, you were the captain of that team, you've been playing this sport since you were 8, you put in all your time into it, there might be something else that we're not getting by looking at your resume about you. There might be something really important, really key to your identity that's not showing up elsewhere. And so with your essay, you really might want to do what we say, go against type. We think you're a jock. We get that from everything. Oh, but your essay tells us something different. So you want to consider that. But I think a lot of students struggle with what to write about. And we have a lot of resources internally, not limited to our staff. We also have documents, some of which I've already shared with you in the email leading up to this webinar. And the next slide here is just going to be an excerpt from our college essay guide, which you should have all gotten. If not, send me a Q&A. I can send that to you. But this is an excerpt from it, and Nina will just walk you through some of the brainstorming exercises we do in the case that you do need to think of some new topics.
Thank you, Justin. Yeah, okay, so like you said, this is a snippet of our brainstorming exercises in the college essay guide. So I highly recommend looking through them whenever you guys get the chance. But if you look through them right now, you can notice that you can probably apply sports to, if not all of them, then most of them. But if you do decide to go through these exercises, give yourself the chance to kind of widen that scope and maybe think of something, even if sports comes up right away, maybe think of another experience or another example that would apply to each question. And if you're having trouble with some of these questions or some parts of these exercises, then we also have a parent questionnaire in the college essay guide that you can maybe give to a guardian or just anyone who really knows you. It could even be a best friend. Sometimes I would say that because sometimes they can point out aspects of yourself that maybe you don't notice right away and you can really incorporate in an essay. So that would be a good way to start, even if you have an idea of what you want to talk about or where you would like your story to go. I still highly recommend going through a few of these brainstorming exercises. And if you didn't receive it in the email, go ahead and drop a Q&A. But also you can find this on our website. I think it's available in our help/resource center, and it should be under curriculum. So the link for that is also in the email that you guys should have received before this meeting. And yeah, okay, so next up, we're going to talk about general pointers, and that would be Justin. Oh, Justin, I don't think we hear you.
Thank you. I had muted myself.
Yeah.
I didn't want to make any inadvertent noises while you were talking, but now here I am. Okay, so general pointers, sports or not, regardless of whether you're writing about sports, you probably want to do these things. And a good essay starts with doing these things. It doesn't matter what you're writing about. The first one, write in your own voice. It is going to be immensely clear to these admissions officers if you are writing in your parents' voice because you've been working a little too closely together on writing this thing. It's going to be immensely clear to these people that you're writing in my voice if I'm your counselor and you're relying too much on me to help you phrase your thoughts. This has to come from you. This is our look at you, at who you are, at what you've learned, at how you define yourself. And if you didn't put yourself at the center of your essay, it's going to be clear. And those essays come across as weaker. And so we want to get some of the colloquialisms maybe that you speak with, not too many of them, but maybe one or two. We might want to get some other quirk of the way you talk, something from your regional dialect, perhaps. These are just examples, but something that defines how you talk. We don't want it to seem like anybody could have written it. The second one is really big, show, don't tell. We could probably have an entire webinar on this, but you could say, I was the most important person to my team. That would be telling. Showing would be, I was there first every practice. When teammates didn't know if they could make practice, I helped them organize their rides to and from. Stuff like that. You want to illustrate why you're so important to the team. You don't want to tell us I was so important to the team. And that goes for any kind of essay, sports, not sports. You really want to show with examples, with illustrations, with sensory language, sensory detail. You don't want to tell. You probably heard this one a million times before, but you want to start these essays with a strong hook. You want it to be pithy, short, direct, to the point. You want it to have some kind of emotional or moody language, but not too much. You want it to really evoke something, but not try too hard. So a lot of the time we're really refining this thing, and it can take 5, 10 different forms that are barely different, but the final form looks or has a much higher impact or much better impact than the first form. Small changes go a long way. So you do want to lead with a big hook, strong hook. We'll take a look at some shortly. You also want to avoid cliches. There are some that are inevitable. We're going to, again, look at that. There are some that you probably don't want to use. You have 650 words for a Common App personal statement. Your first draft is likely going to be far more words than that. Words are going to be at a premium. Every word counts, every word matters. So if you use a cliche, you're actually wasting words, because I can't tell you how many essays I've seen where these words appear. The tears streamed down my face. Okay, yes, but I think that's 5 words. 6 words, and it's an expression that is so common, that is so overused, that they don't actually do anything for you. You would be much better served finding 1 word or 2 words that capture the same image without this sense of, oh, I've seen this a million times before. And this is your first time likely writing this essay. I highly doubt any of you are applying to college for the second time. Maybe you are and you have done this before, but for the most part, you guys have not done this before. That's why we're here. That's why your English teacher is here. People who can take a look at your essay and can say, hey, I know what you were going for with this, but this is a little overused and let's work on rephrasing this. The next point is to strike a balance. There's many ways that you could strike a balance. You could strike a balance between success and failure, between I and team. You could strike a balance between background and intense detail in one moment. In many ways, you're going to have to be striking a balance. You do not want to have an unbalanced essay, whether it's about sports or not. And the final point is that it needs to be about you, which sounds like the first point, to write in your own voice. But sometimes we see essays that are more about your grandpa than about you. They're more about the person in your community than about you. Those can be really great to read, but the admissions departments might walk away from those essays saying, wow, really moving story. So what? Did I learn anything about that student? And if the answer is no, even if it's a great story, it's just not going to be a great personal statement. And so you need to keep that in mind, that it's got to be about you. Okay.
Okay, guys. So before we give you, I think, a 5-minute break to review the first example essay that you should have received an email before this meeting, I'm going to go ahead and cover a few things that you should look for as you reread, or if you can, just jump back if you remember something off the top of your head. So the first one is imagery, and imagery refers to words/phrases that evoke one or more of the reader's 5 senses. So that's pretty straightforward, right? And then we want you to look for diction, which is choosing the right phrasing can be a painstakingly challenge. So learning how to be concise is an important part of the process. Diction means being concise, still getting your point across, but not creating too long of a sentence, for example. And then tone and voice. So determining your tone is imperative to conveying meaning, and it's important too that your tone matches the content of your essay. So do not be afraid to sound like yourself, and actually be afraid not to sound like yourself, like Justin mentioned before. So this essay has to be the epitome of the writer, and the writer has to own it. So look out for that as well. Check out if the tone is matching the voice, and also look for figurative language. So for example, metaphor, an example of that is the ball was in my court, both inside and outside the stadium. Also look for similes. So an example of that is Mike Tyson destroyed his opponent like a tank. Also personification. The baseball just didn't want to hit the strike zone. And hyperbole, this game is taking over. And alliteration with 260 stuck on the scoreboard. So here are just some examples of the figurative language that you could be looking for in this essay and also the next one. But if you don't find an example for each one, totally fine. Just list as many as you can. And yeah, I think we can start the 5 minutes now, right, Justin? Oh, you're muted.
As usual. I think we can expand that to, let's say, 7 minutes
Okay.
or so. Give everybody a chance to review just the first essay that we sent in the email. There's going to be a before version. There's going to be an after version. You might feel like this is really crunching you for time, but if you've got an upcoming ACT, you've got to be moving on those timed reading skills anyway. So practice getting through it as fast as you can and noticing these things that we've just mentioned. Also, feel free to notice anything else. If you do notice something that has changed from the before to the after version of the essay, and you want us to note it, feel free to type that in the Q&A. We will also have some stuff to talk about on our own. But yeah, go ahead and review that stuff now, and let me know if you've got any questions. Okay, so hopefully that was enough time to review these a little bit. One thing you'll note is that there are quite a few similarities between the before and after for this first essay. And it's going to be up to you how much you want to refine your first draft versus really try to rebuild it with perfection in mind. Students have different opinions about this. Students feel differently about how much time they have to put into this, about whether they want to give totally ground up new drafts a go. So it's going to be something that's up to you about in terms of when you get feedback from others, how much of that you want to incorporate, how much you truly want to change. So some things really did change in this essay. They can be minor changes that go a long way. The hook is shorter. It really just loses the word colder or cold. The coldness of the moment is mentioned in the next sentence about the water being frigid and the cold air. So we dropped the word cold from the first sentence. This seems like a small detail, and it is, but having a really short, direct hook can help to draw the reader in. You don't want to make it too drawn out. So there's been a small change there. There are a few more specific details in this essay. Throughout, you might be able to find such details. There were some before, talking about the Clash of Clans, developing this character of the coach who doesn't really care about the team. There are some new details in the second essay, I believe, about what this person is doing to demonstrate leadership and to demonstrate involvement with the team. So we get some specific detail that we didn't have before. The diction is stronger, it's more concise. there are shorter sentences. If you look at the first draft of what we're dealing with here, the sentences are long. There's a lot of comma splices. There's literal grammatical errors that might not appear as such. They're minor. They're what we call a comma splice, where there should be a period, or just the sentence structure is a little bit overlong and rambly. But really cutting down and having concise sentences, pretty simple sentence structures, maybe broken up by a more complex sentence structure every few sentences. That's kind of what you want to be doing. You want to make this really easy to read. You don't want it to seem like it's off the cuff or like you're just telling us everything from the top of your head. Obviously, you want it to sound really measured and really controlled. And I think that there's a higher sense of that with the second draft of this first essay. There are also some lines that got toned down, and the toning down is really important. There's a line in the first one, essentially arguing that this person is the most important person on the team, and it sounds a little bit arrogant. There is a better balance in the second draft against that arrogance. So the first draft says something like, I can't give myself all the credit, but I do believe my leadership has been instrumental. That phrasing sounds like you want to give yourself all the credit. You might not be able to, but you want to. That phrasing about I can't give myself all the credit, but that got replaced by the credit belongs to many people. And that's a small but significant change. You really just want to emphasize humility if you're also writing an essay about your pride in your hard work and your importance to the team. So that goes back to this point about balance, right? That we really want to be balanced. We don't want to have ourselves come across as one particular attribute without this consideration of like the opposing attribute that kind of helps give rise to a complex person. We want to have this sort of more nuanced, more detailed portrait that doesn't just say one simple thing and say it too strongly. It's a real thing that you could say something too strongly and rub somebody the wrong way in one of these departments. There are a few things that we've left unsaid this presentation, one of which is to avoid common misspellings. There are a few in the before version of this essay. Role, R-O-L-E, misspelled as R-O-L-L. That won't get picked up by your spell check a lot of the time. I found that a lot of my students don't even have the automatic spelling check enabled, so you might not catch stuff like that. And as good as the elders, superiors are in your life, there are typos and misspellings in newspapers that have had 3 rounds of edits by professionals. So ultimately, this is on you, and you want to avoid stuff that's not a incorrect word, but a misspelling in terms of using the wrong form of the word. So that's something you want to do. You also want to make sure you come across as having some humility, and you want to be likable. And this goes for sure in life generally, but especially for these essays. You're competing against many people, and these folks are reading a lot of their essays, and you need to come across as a person that they would want to have on their campus. So whether that's humble, kind, caring, patient, we're probably going to want to demonstrate one of these adjectives, even if we're demonstrating pride, hard work, like excellence on the field. If we're demonstrating those things, great, but we also want to demonstrate that other side. So some stuff changed in this essay. Backstory got cut out. It was ineffective, but there are still some things that could be better. To me, what I see in the after is too much emphasis on a long ago moment, the foggy Saturday morning of the hook, where this person learned to become a better leader in the pool with their water polo team. And that moment is important, and it should be given some centrality in this essay. But the next part about what happens when this person joins varsity and becomes a captain, it almost seems like we're hitting fast forward through that stuff. And that is the more recent stuff. And that is what we should really be trying to draw out is kind of the leadership of being the varsity captain. And it happens a bit quickly, even in the second draft. And so one area that we can improve is sort of the pacing. We have 2 paragraphs about a long ago time, and then 2 paragraphs about the now. That seems like good balance, but we really want more about the now. I have many students who've written essays about something that happened on the field when they were like 9. And that's cool. A concussion they had when they were 11. That might be important in your life, but there's going to be a little bit of skepticism if you're writing about something a really long time ago and you don't give enough weight to where you are now. So keep that in mind, the pacing with that. That also relates to the lack of specifics in the second half. Like I was saying, I felt like it was a little bit fast forwarded through the current time period where this person is the captain. We had some really good, the character of the coach playing Clash of Clans instead of helping the team warm up. That's a wonderful image, a really good character to have as a foil for this main character, the narrator, who wants to be great at their sport. But then we don't really get anything similar to that at the end. And so we want to try, if we can, to keep that momentum up with the figurative language, with the imagery, with the strong diction throughout the essay. We don't want to tail off and then start fast forwarding. If we see ourselves doing that, we need to say, hold up. This essay has an incomplete pivot. If you look at the after version, it is in the final paragraph. And this person lets us know that the ability to lead others in pursuit of a common goal is a skill they will hold their whole life. And they're thankful to have been given the opportunity to practice that through water polo. That is a little bit big picture. I would like a specific. I would like to know some real way that you can connect what you learned as a leader in water polo to a specific outcome that you have achieved in other aspects of your life. Some counselors will have a different opinion on that issue, and that's one thing you're going to run into is it's impossible to write the perfect essay because everybody has a different approach and a different idea of what hits really hard. But for me, I'm looking for a more concrete pivot to something really tangible in the student's life that changed as a result of what they learned on the field. At the same time, I want to show it, I don't want to tell it. And this conclusion is a little bit telling. It doesn't show us, it tells us. It says, this is a skill I'll hold my whole life. I'm thankful for the opportunity. I wasn't comfortable originally. Now it's very pertinent in my life. It will remain so throughout my future. I look forward to being able to exercise it. That is telling. That is telling. And there is a way to illustrate that with an example or an image or some kind of metaphor. A conclusion should generally probably be less telly than this. And one way you can get there with a conclusion is to try to get back to an image that you started your essay with. So I keep coming back to this coach playing Clash of Clans. To me, that's a really strong image, a really strong character. There could be a conclusion that manages to refer back to that. I didn't write this essay, so I didn't provide one, but this person could have perhaps referred back to, I look forward to being able to exercise this skill, like whether the people on my team are focused as I am, or whether they're, stuck on their phone playing Clash of Clans. That wasn't the best conclusion, but you can try to refer back to a strong image from earlier in your essay as a conclusion. That might be something that works well. So what I would say in conclusion is that this essay could have been workshopped more. And that's not to throw anybody, any students or colleagues under the bus. That's to say that in reality, when you are doing this, you do not have unlimited time. You think you have all the time in the world, and then school gets crazy, sports get crazy. You're here, you play sports. You're gonna, if you don't plan it correctly, run into the issue of time. And you might have to settle with an essay that's a 8 or 9 out of 10 instead of that perfect 10 that you really want. That can happen whether you hire a professional or not. So you need to keep that in mind. That's one of the biggest takeaways from here is that get to writing. If you haven't started writing and you're entering senior year now, let's go. The time is now. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Nina, who has got an example of an essay that I think is a little closer to that perfect 10. Really love the essay that she's going to present. But I think before then, we're going to take another short break
Mhm.
Just give you guys a chance to review that essay.
Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed the second essay. Oh, looks like we have another guest with us. Oh, so cute. Okay, guys, so let's talk about what changed first. So a few things that I noticed. A lot of unnecessary background information was cut out of the before. An example of that I pulled out was in the last paragraph in the before version, where it says, over the last 2 summers, I've worked in international service, building wild animal shelters in the Amazon rainforest, constructing roads, classrooms, and town halls for impoverished communities in Costa Rica and helping teach English in the Andes Mountains in Peru. And then I think there's a couple more sentences after that that goes along with all of these actions that this writer is stating. And it sounds too resume if you think about it. Although it may sound like very important information, and it is also something that can be explained in another area in the application. So it's not too necessary to go into detail about every single little thing within your personal statement, especially given the fact that you only have 650 words total or max. Another thing I noticed is it went from focusing too much on the actions. Well, I kind of just mentioned this, but focusing too much on the actions to focusing more on the experience and lessons learned. That is very important to do, as Justin and I mentioned before. It's really an opportunity for you to show your growth and talk about those lessons, what you got out of them, how you grew, and how that's going to translate into your life in the future. And the next thing I noticed was more use of figurative language. So for example, in the second paragraph in the after version, now I study the same book cover to cover, starting to make this dream a reality. So that's a really good, strong example of a metaphor. And then one last thing, in the after version, I think it does a better job at illustrating the process and result. So for example, in the third paragraph, where it mentions the hours of studying, I think the writer does a really good job of talking about the hours of studying and how that translated into their success. Oh, and sorry, one last thing. In the after version, I think it also does a better job at integrating academics. So you can see an example of that in the second to last paragraph. And let's see. Justin, did you notice anything else that I didn't mention?
I just want to double down on what you said. I mean, this is a really wonderful essay. It starts with a really strong hook. We know right away we're in an airplane. They didn't say I'm in an airplane, but most of us know the brand Cessna of small airplane. Maybe not everybody, but many people are going to come away from this very clear. Oh, we're in an airplane. We're in a small airplane. Seems like a dramatic moment already with a flight tower command coming in. So we're really brought into a moment with a super strong hook. There's a bunch of really great imagery and metaphors, whether it's the plastic model of the fighter jet. Did that one make it through? Maybe not. I might have been looking at the wrong one, but no, we've got the instrument flight rating textbook. We do have the plastic model of the Cessna as well. So there's a bunch of like concrete images that come through that really help us like imagine this person's world being full of planes and connecting it to their family. And it does it in a very concise way. If you compare the after one to the before one, it really accomplishes the same emotional punch in so many fewer words. And the way you do that is with figurative language and really, really strong imagery. And I just really want to, again, just emphasize what you said with the way that the pivot was done. I think that if you look at the difference between the before and after in terms of how they pivoted to academics, it is loads better in the second one. The second one basically says, every time I see my community from the sky, I'm reminded of this kind of beauty I learned about in English class. If you look at the first one, it's not that smooth. So let this be an example of how to do this very smoothly. I'm really just gushing. I really like this one, but it's not totally perfect. We did find a couple of things that maybe could have been improved. So I'll let Nina talk about those.
A couple of things, but we really did have to search for them. But again, you guys may have noticed something that maybe we didn't, but what could have still been better? So one thing we did want to note is where it says heart racing. So that may sound like a cliche sometimes, not that it's a bad way to start the sentence or necessarily the most, awful cliche you can include in your personal statement, but maybe something as simple as changing heart racing to something like heart aflutter, or something like that. So a small change like that can go a long way. Another thing we noticed was the repetition of Palo Alto Airport, which is at the end of the essay, I believe. So having that stated twice in the same paragraph, not far away from each other, sounds a bit repetitive. So it's good to look out for that. And then also the final line of the whole essay, we both thought it sounded good, but it might have sounded a bit stronger, maybe a little bit more poetic to connect it to the flock of birds from The Hook, for example, with the feeling of being scared. So those are just a few things that we noticed that could be better. Although this is a very strong final draft, we thought that these 3 points could make it even stronger. But yeah, I think that's it. Justin, if you notice anything just recently, but I think it's great other than that.
I think that it's, again, there's matters of taste, and this conclusion you could still say is maybe a little bit telly, but it's telling us that they're grateful. And if you're going to tell us anything without illustrating it, let it be a quality like gratefulness or humility or something like that. It's a good thing to communicate. So if you're going to tell anything, tell that. One other thing I'll add is that peppered throughout here are just some nice words. The diction is good. There's not too much of it. For the most part, this really does sound like a teenager talking poetically, intentionally poetically. But I just want to make one metaphor, if I may, before we move on to our conclusion, which is that sometimes writing these essays are a little bit about like adding a little flair, or a little bit like adding a little flair to your outfit. You could be wearing a very basic outfit, and you could put on one necklace or one thing that really pops, and it could change the whole nature of your outfit. I do think that peppering some good words into your essay, not too many of them, but words you really thought about, words that are really nice words. I don't know what Donald Trump would say. The best words, that's what he would say. And you want to pepper those in, not too much, but one or two really good words can really spruce up an essay. And so you don't want to lose sight of that. If you're feeling like, oh, my draft looks a little bit basic, all it's going to take to maybe make it pop, a couple of words. So as we move forward to the conclusion, I want you to take a few things away. One of which is that you shouldn't let this overwhelm you, this process. I believe that this one that we just discussed went through many drafts. It's very difficult to cut stuff. It seems very important to you in your story, but that's why we're here, is to help you make tough choices about what to cut. And in the end, there's a few commonalities between the best essays. One, the topic, frankly, doesn't even matter. You could have an incredible essay about walking your dog. You could have an incredible essay about the dinner you have with your family every Friday night. That to you might seem super routine. But if the detail's right and the language is right and the emotions are right, to somebody else, it might seem revolutionary or very moving. No matter what topic you choose, balance is going to be key. We've kind of reiterated that time and again over the course of this webinar. You really don't want to come off as arrogant. You don't want to come off as too timid. You don't want to come off as any effort you put in was the result of external forces. You want them to be a mix of internal and external. I'm thinking back to one example that I didn't mention from the first essay, which was that in the before version, the writer wrote something and said that basically like, well, my parents were making me do it or something like that. And like, yeah, that language is probably not so good. You want to cut that out. You do want to have some external influence, but also internal influence. All those other balances we talked about, that's all key. Bringing it back to going against type. If you are an athlete top to bottom, your whole resume is sports. You love sports. You think about sports 24/7. Think about writing about something else. It could benefit you. On the flip side, you're probably not in this webinar right now, but if you are not an athlete if sports don't really pop off the page for you, there might actually be something really cool you can glean from your involvement in sports and the lessons you've learned from trying to make it work. So that's just about going against type. Again, make sure you make a strong pivot if you write about sports. We want to know you're probably not going to be a professional in your sport. If you are, mazel tov, congratulations, that's amazing. I would love to hear about it. I'm curious, talk to me after the meeting. But if not, you're probably going to want to pivot to something off of the sports field, off of the court. And if you don't do that, your essay might lack a little bit of oomph. And finally, conclude with a bang. Conclusions are the hardest part. Don't get stuck on it while you're writing. It's probably the last thing you're going to tidy up and finish before you say your essay is final. So don't get stuck on that. But when the time comes, think about how you open, think about your hook, and see if you can recall that with some kind of language or image. We do have 4 minutes for Q&A, which is not the longest time in the entire world, but hopefully enough time to answer a question or two. If anybody has a question, please feel free to type one in, and you can direct it to either Nina or myself, and we will respond accordingly.
While you guys do that, I just want to make one last point about what you covered before, Justin. Not wanting to do this now during the summer, totally understandable, especially when you will be starting this whole process, which will be the summer after your junior year. That's going to be the summer after your busiest year of high school, and most often the most difficult year of high school. So it's, it's totally normal for students to be burnt out at this point and not want to start in this process. My biggest advice is just to think about the fact that the following summer, you won't have anything to do before college. And this is just something that you need to get done to get the results that you've been hoping for. You don't want to think to yourself, I went through junior year and all of the things that came with it for no reason. I want to get started on this sooner rather than later so that I can even increase my chances and not have that hard work go to waste. So just keep thinking about the following summer, vacation, college, and then hopefully that'll help you get through. But I don't see any questions pop up right now. So
most folks think of questions after the fact. So if you have any, please feel free to reach out to either Nina or me or both of us or anybody else you know at ESM. We're always here to help. We really like this stuff. And I think I can speak for Nina right now in saying that we've enjoyed talking about this for you today. And we wish you all the best of luck.